Welcome back to Classrooms and Jail Cells, where we unpack the systems shaping our schools and spotlight the leaders fighting for change. I'm Uriel, and today's guest is Mrs. Barron, the newly elected president of Education Minnesota, and the first Black woman to lead the state's largest teachers union. A former classroom teacher and lifelong advocate, Mrs. Barron brings frontline insight and bold vision to one of education's most urgent challenges: exclusionary discipline. Before we dive into the conversation, let's pause and look at the numbers, because behind every statistic is a student whose story could have gone differently. According to U.S. Department of Education, Black students make up just 15% of student population, yet they account for 31% of school-based arrests and referrals to law enforcement. Students with disabilities, who represent only about 12% of the student body, account for over 2/3 of those subjected to physical restraint or seclusion. And in one school year alone, public school children lost an estimated 18 million days of instruction due to exclusionary discipline policies. Black girls with disabilities are 4 times more likely than their white peers to be suspended, patterns that reflect bias, neglect, and systemic harm. There's another layer to consider: who is standing at the front of the classroom? According to the National Center for Education Statistics data from 2020 to 2021, 80% of U.S. public school teachers identify as non-Hispanic white, while just 46% of students did. Hispanic and Black educators each make up under 10% of the workforce. Through those groups represent 28% and 15% of the student body, respectively. This gap in representation shapes everything from classroom culture to disciplinary outcomes. Mrs. Barrett and I will explore how reclaiming discipline requires both policy change and educator power, and how diverse leadership can transform the trajectory for students of color and those with disabilities. Let's dive in. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, excited to have you here. All right, so let's begin. Can you share your journey from classroom teacher to president of Education Minnesota?
Yes. So I started as actually an ESP or a homeschool liaison. So I would help students and families kind of navigate school in Richfield. Taught for many years, but while I was teaching, I became very active in the union because I just felt like the union is supporting all of us, was a way to make sure that I could be an advocate for educators, because I felt like I was a strong advocate for my students during the day. I could kind of advocate after school for educators, and which led me to statewide advocacy and then some national work. So all of those pieces, from helping support member rights, helping support educators in the buildings, to some statewide work with our Ethnic Minority Affairs Committee, kind of led me to this path now where I'm now the president of the statewide union, which represents about 86,000 members now.
How does that feel?
It's quite something today. It's really an honor to be able to represent all the members and the students within the state and be able to advocate, help organize, help advance their goals. But it's a heavy lift as well. I feel the weight because I really am passionate about making sure that educators and students have what they need. And so I'm excited. I'm excited for what we have ahead of us.
So looking back, how did disciplinary policies affect students in your classroom?
Yes. So there's always building-wide expectations and policies for discipline, but I made sure that my space within the classroom was a place where the students knew the expectations, but we could kind of navigate them with family, guardian, caretaker support, and really kind of, I wouldn't say adjust the building-wide expectations and rules, but make sure students understood. In this space, you're safe. We can have some restorative practices before kind of restorative practices became kind of this thing. I'll use kind of the air quotes there thing, but just make sure that students felt safe, they felt cared for, and that when they made mistakes, just like I would make a mistake, that we could work through that without having to go just immediately, like, you make a mistake, you go to a principal's office, kind of this traditional line of mistakes happen, there's an authority figure to then solve it. Nope. Students, no matter what the level, are smart, they can figure it out, and that's something that we need to do more of, I believe.
Yes. And that's something I do too with my students. Like there's a lot of teachers I've seen that, like, they misbehave. They get security to come to the classroom, pick them up and send them to the dean's office or wherever. I've noticed that with my students, they like to take a lap around the floor, right? So I designed a specific pass that's dedicated to just walk around. Like, I was like, yeah, go take a couple laps, calm down. Once you're ready, I come back into the classroom and we can talk about this when we're doing our own assignments, right? Or there's like time on your own or after class, like on some private one-on-one to figure out that what's happening. Because a lot of the times too, I've noticed that a lot of problems are coming from outside the school that they bring with, right? It's not really coming from inside the school.
And depending on the level, I taught elementary.
Right.
You were in my class a long time ago. But having zones, that traditional, everybody sits in a desk and in a row, that wasn't my style. So, if kids feel free to, I can't sit right now, I need to go and be in the back of the room, I need to stand up, I need to move. Those things shouldn't be grounds for a disciplinary action.
Right.
If you need to move, you had a bad day, you need a nap. Sometimes that needs to be okay, because if a kid feels safe enough to come and tell you that an incident happened in the home the night before, they shouldn't be punished for needing to take care of themselves.
Right.
And as educators, we need to be open to that. I know there's a lot, you have to get through the curriculum and all those things, but our students need to be able to feel safe and tell you, I need to take a break, I need to go walk the labs, etc.
Yes, and I had this student last year who slept a lot in my class, right? I was like, oh, and I had him first thing in the morning, so I was like, oh, like it's normal, right? But I noticed that it was happening almost daily, right? So I asked him about it, I was like, do you sleep at home? And he's like, yes, but like he lived up in Hopping Pop, and so like, and school was in Bloomington, so you have to take public transportation. So I was like, that makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, if you need to sleep, it's fine. Sleep out. Just make sure you look at the notes when you get home or when you have time, so you don't fall behind, and we can take extra time to focus on whatever it is that you're struggling on, right? So I think that's one way to I helped a lot with my students, like finding alternative ways so they don't fall behind in class, right?
And I did that as I was in the classroom for many years, and then I was an instructional coach. And so I had the opportunity to be able to help other elementary teachers. And then I helped across the district too, in Richfield, be able to say, hey, what are some things you can do? Because students will learn in a variety of ways. What can you do to help out? And do you know the backstory? I think, if we take time to get to know people, get to know students, we kind of find out those backstories and can help, besides just, again, going straight to a disciplinary action.
Yes. Okay. So how was stepping into this leadership role that you have now changed the way you think about student discipline and advocacy?
You have to look at it. I've had great experiences. I've had experiences where I've had to have support. I had to have support from administration, and looking at it from now this 10,000 foot level, I'd say, statewide, there has to be a way that we can have policies that still create safe and learning environments for our students, but then have some local control as well. Sometimes when we make a sweeping policy because of one or two incidences, they don't necessarily help everyone. So I think sometimes we need to look at that and make sure that we're listening to what's happening, like at each or all corners of the state, what's happening, and can people adjust? Because I would not have been happy if the building had a policy and I had to follow it to the T, and I couldn't adjust to what the needs were of my students. And I wouldn't, as a leader, especially in this role. And that's not really the role of the state. We help support our locals. The locals can do things. But again, like if there was a state law that said everybody has to do this, and there was no way to then support your students and their best needs, advocating for that would be very difficult for me. So yeah, it'd be hard.
Yeah, that would, yes. And then the last question of this first segment: what moments in your teaching career left a lasting impact on how you view equity in education?
Great question. So I think for me personally, I have some from my own school experience. I was considered, gifted, talented, and whatever that means, But I was just passed on. So it was like, oh, go read the book. Oh, go do the thing. Go do the math. And we'll just keep passing you on. So I can't tell you the names of my teachers.
Okay.
I never had those connections. It was like, oh, just go do this thing. And I was the only kid of color in every one of my classrooms growing up. It wasn't until like middle school and then high school, I was like, oh, look at how diverse everything is here. So I felt very isolated. I didn't have a lot of connection. So I wanted to make sure that I was like a voice and I could build connection with all my students. But I had a student come up to me and say, "Oh my goodness, our skins match." And I was like, oh, okay. So the impact past the curriculum, past the books I chose, past the things I had in the room. It was like, okay, just being in the space. And it wasn't even a student I had in the classroom. It was a kid from down the hallway. And they were like, "I see you every day, and I just had to come up and tell you that." And I was just like, okay, I'm making an impact just by being here. But they said to me, "We don't have the same books you have," because that classroom teacher didn't have a lot of diverse books. So I took it upon myself to just ask the teacher if they knew about some things. So I think kind of getting around to that, taking those moments to listen, to figure out where I can help, where others might need help, kind of that push and pull in when it comes to equity. But I just think back to that matching skills match and just the impact that, just that one little moment. Somebody else might have looked at that and said, "Oh my goodness, kid said that to you," but no, it made an impact, and smile on their face, is something that I'll always remember. Always remember
Yes.
that students.
And I remember prior to Centennial, I went to a lot of diverse schools, both in Minneapolis and Richfield. And it wasn't until third grade, yeah, third grade, that's when you were my first teacher of color, right? And then we also had Miss Ray for fourth grade. And I was like,
Yep.
yeah, I've seen that. I didn't think, I didn't have another teacher of color until high school. And then when I started working here, I would have my students of color, right? Like I had a lot of Latinos and Hispanics come up to me, right? Even if they weren't in my classroom, for lunch, like I just wanted me time.
Yeah.
But they would come in groups and just sit in my class, and then
Yeah.
so it was like that feeling of having them feel belong or in the place that they feel safe, right? Because that's so like even in diverse schools, we lack that representation of color with teachers.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a really big thing that schools can improve on.
And it's one reason I chose elementary, because I wanted to make sure that I would be seen in the elementary space, because I never saw anybody growing up. My sister never saw anybody growing up. I don't think my brother had any educators of color, and he's 14 years younger than me. Growing up in Minneapolis, I went through the Minneapolis public schools. But I just wanted to make sure early on kids saw that they too could be educators, that they could see themselves and have a voice for them through the process of navigating school. So,
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yes. All right. So let's take a deeper look at the policies that shape how we respond to student behavior, right? In this segment, I call understanding the pipeline systematically. So, how would you explain the school to prison pipeline to someone unfamiliar to this concept?
great question. So, I would explain it as the policies and the people that create conditions for students to fail. And that failure then keeps them withdrawn from reaching their potential. And when they don't reach their potential, they may, not always, but they may then end up in another system, which ends up being our criminal justice system.
Yes, that's actually a really good, good answer. Which kind of transitions into my next question. When did you first become aware of the term school to prison pipeline, and how did it resonate with your own experiences in schools, both either as a student or as an educator?
Yeah, it was, I was at the National Education Association, the NEA. It was actually at a representative assembly. So they have a convention over the summer. And there was a new business item talking about the school to prison pipeline. And I was like, school to prison pipeline. And so I was interested in that. I actually joined a group of educators from across the nation that were interested in learning more. So I wanted to find out what Minnesota was doing for this school to prison pipeline. So with that group of educators, we started diving in. What are the national policies? What are statewide policies? And so from there, I became pretty vested in that. And I used actually that union then. So I did that through the union. And we started looking at what Minnesota's doing. There's a couple coalitions and some other folks that were actually advocating that I didn't even know about at that time. That was great. So I was able then to share some national things with the coalition partners here. And it was probably about 15 years ago now, but sometimes progress and things take a while. So.
Yes, they do.
Mhm.
um, As a teacher, were there moments when discipline felt less about correction and more about control?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep. It definitely, and I would say I had something on my desk. I had two statements on my desk. One was, oh my goodness, what was the quote? I wish I would. So it was about control. That my job as an educator was to guide, not control. Basically, it was around, that was basically the premise. And the other one was always yet, like just that growth mindset piece. And I had that a long time before I learned about growth mindset. But it was just always never say, my great grandma always said, never say never, because tomorrow and the next minute's not promised. But so it was always yet. So don't say no, don't say never, because it should just be yet. Like, I don't know yet. And so when it came to discipline policies, thinking about those things, I always wanted to go, okay, I'm not in control. You know that when somebody's having a tantrum, you just go, how can I guide? How can I support? So I kind of looked to those things to help me in guiding
Guiding.
over control. But it is hard sometimes. You want to be in control. You want to help support, make sure other students aren't hurt, harmed if a student's having a difficult time. But again, there is a difference,
Yeah.
big difference.
What narratives have been normalized in how we talk about, in quotes, disruptive students, and who gets that label?
So usually, I mean, all the research and stuff, it usually falls to just say it, our black and brown boys first, then our girls, and then anybody with labels. So if kids and adults know that they have labels, if there's, labels of any SPED labels, anything with any disruptive, now, EBD, I know there's some new terms around EBD, but ADHD, etc. Those are the kids then, unfortunately, that are looked at sometimes to be disruptive before they're even doing a thing, which
Yes.
unfortunately is not okay. And one reason why I would not ask for information before kids came into my class, besides names and things,
Right.
but that is unfortunately one of the problems that we have
Yeah.
in the system.
Yes, I remember it was in sixth grade. I mean, I remember even throughout elementary, I would always get during conferences, kid talks a lot in class, right? I would always get that. And my friends, they would always give me like the look during conferences, like just gotta like be quiet in class, right? But I was someone who just never could, right?
Yeah.
I remember in sixth grade, towards the end of the school year, we had sort of like a kind of like a celebration to end sixth grade, right? I remember I got the prize in front of the whole sixth grade class of student to argue the most with the teacher. And
Yeah.
at the time, well, I found it fun. It's like, yeah, like it's something
Yeah.
I would do, right? Especially with like math and science classes, right?
Yeah.
It's like those were classes I was interested in back at the time. And anytime I would not understand, like I would always have a one-on-one argument with the teacher, right? And so at that time I found it funny. But growing up, I was called out on it in front of teachers,
Mhm.
administrators were there, and all of the sixth grade class. So I was like, wow, like they put me on the spot like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that was quite a time.
And then that one moment then could set you up for, I mean, if that was like a middle school, 6, 7, 8, that could have set you up then for 7th grade and 8th
Right.
grade. And then now you are labeled the
Student to argue,
student
right?
to
Yes.
argue. And
Yes.
yeah. And unfortunately, those labels can carry, they can stay with
They
the
can
student
stay,
for a
yes.
long time.
Yeah. Oh,
Yep.
yeah, it's quite something.
And instead of looking at the systems we have, was there enough engagement? Why isn't discourse and questioning okay? Those should be part of the experience that kids have. It shouldn't be sit and get
Mhm.
for everything. So I don't know. Sometimes people go, well, you must have just had a different kind of classroom. I was like, yeah, it was not quiet all the time. It was a little bit noisy because that's okay.
Yeah. And then how do you think standardized disciplinary policies like zero tolerance have shaped school culture over time?
I think they've led to an increase in labeling students and disengagement because they basically created the culture of if you don't conform, you're out. So instead of we're going to take you as you are, let's figure out what may be behind any specific behavior and again, I hate to say just like behavior is a blanket statement because I think behavior is goes in instances. Like it's not like you have a behavior, like you showed a behavior. But I think when you have that culture, then any deviation from what they then classify as normal is abnormal. And then you create students or adults, people then that are considered abnormal or have a problem. And then that just feeds into, if you are a problem, you should be dealt with. And in our country, it's always been, if you need to be dealt with, there should be discipline. The discipline then leads to this. So our schools, unfortunately, have, not all, some schools have that culture of conform or not. And not means you are pushed out, which should not be the role
Right.
for our schools. So
Yeah. Yeah, so that wraps up segment 2, right? So now we're going to transition to segment 3, called Union Response and Policy Influence. So, what is Education Minnesota actively or currently doing or planning to do to challenge exclusionary discipline practices in public schools?
Oh, great question. So, Education Minnesota is member led. So, when it comes to our legislative agenda, when it comes to what we lobby and advocate for at the Capitol, it comes from our members. So, when it comes to any of the disciplinary, like exclusionary discipline practices, et cetera, that comes from our members and that goes on to our legislative agenda. So, all of those policies then are things that we will either join coalitions on or then have our team then say, we would like to legislate around X, Y, or Z. So we want to make sure that we have safe classrooms. So it's something that's been in our legislative agenda and our policies for a long time to make sure that we have safe spaces so that our students and our educators can learn or educators can teach. We have a lot of advocacy around that. We have a lot of coalition partners. So there's a lot that we do around that, around it. So it's hard to like pick a specific piece, but that's kind of the overview what we do.
Okay, yeah, that's good. No, that's good. What are barriers you face when trying to promote restorative practices across districts?
Yep. I think because of that local, each local is so different in how they may be structured. But at the same time, locals and the members really will share. So they'll say, here's what's going on, here's what's great. And then we can, as a statewide organization, we can help promote that through professional development because we have an online professional development platform. We have a lot of members teaching, sharing. So there are ways that if great things are happening, we can help share that statewide, or members just going to take it on themselves. You know, this is what we're doing. When restorative circles were coming around, you know, and they still are. They're still a great way to support our students. But when that was happening, we saw, you know, people reaching out. Hey, did you know? Or they'd share in different meetings. And then from there, we were able to kind of develop programs or professional development opportunities so that district by district, local by local, there were resources. And we could do that union wise then through some of our professional development or some of our events and conferences.
Yeah, I only know about Education Minnesota. I don't know what they actually.
Oh, I can't wait to tell you about all the stuff.
Let's see. How can unions mobilize teachers to resist or reshape policies that disproportionately affect Black and Brown students?
Again, I think it's about engaging members, taking what's important to them and finding a way to get their voice out there. So around these policies, it's about getting those members that are really passionate about it, getting them in front of legislators. If it's around policy changes, getting them in front of the media. So we actually help with, through that legislative piece, we can help prepare them and set up meetings to meet with legislators. We have a great communications team that helps our members speak to the media or go to press conferences. So there's lots of ways like overall that we can help, or it can just be a convening. We've had special member convenings where if it's around exclusionary discipline practices or something else, we can say, would you like to come together and talk and meet? Where they can come together, talk. Is there something we want specifically to do that we want to advocate for? And we can help be that kind of convener for those type of things. And that could be then statewide. That's one of the great things about being statewide, because there may be somebody up at the Lake of the Woods that wants to discuss this in Duluth and Rochester, as well as right here in the metro area. And we can help convene people together so that they can they can talk on this, share how it looks, maybe look a little bit different,
Hmm.
but it really, when it comes down to it, it's the same. We all want the same things:
Right.
safe environments and people and students to be able to grow and learn. So
That's good. And how can people know about what's happening within
yeah.
Education Minnesota?
Yep. The biggest thing is we have our website, educationminnesota.org, and then reaching out to their own local unions to find out, because a lot of local unions will have things that are happening, and then they can reach out to us. So through their locals or just straight by coming to our website. We have all sorts of information on the website, from upcoming events, what's happening at the legislature. Did you know? Programs. So it's kind of broken down for you, lots of different ways. And then we're a merged state. So we belong to both national unions, the AFT and the NEA. So that provides you with all sorts of resources as well. So there's groups happening all over the country that you can become an advocate or organize or mobilize for. So it's pretty awesome to be able to sit with like-minded folks and be able to say, how do you feel? Or sometimes I'll just say, sometimes when people are like, well, I'm not sure. And you get to sit down and go, well, here's how it affects me here. Here's how it affects me in a different state, and kind of get different ideas and come up with solutions. It's pretty awesome.
That's good. No, yeah, that's good. So that wraps up segment 3. So kind of transitioning to segment 4, restorative and trauma informed approaches. From a union leadership standpoint, how can we better train and support teachers to recognize trauma informed responses over punitive discipline?
Yep. So one thing we can do is look at educator training. There's a lot that happens, when new people enter the profession. There's the pedagogy and then the student teaching, but we can start there. And besides just, do you know how to teach, reading or writing or your content field? Do you understand students and where we're at? So there's a little bit that can happen there. But I think when you reach that student teaching piece, or even into professional development, when you're hired or as you're working, there's a lot we can do for professional development. And that can come from the state having something legislative, where then our professional educator licensing board and standards board, PELSB, says this is one of the areas that you should have statewide as part of your license. So there's different things that we can do. We can have different requirements, but I think it's important to really step back and kind of have a multifaceted approach to how we look at it, and how we take educators or teachers and say, you want to be in this profession, here's a way to reach students, not just teach them, but reach them. And it takes different ways. And if a student's having a hard time, here's some things you can do, instead of just kind of stepping back into, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to send them out the room, lead into some of those problems.
And how do you see, how do you see the role of trauma in shaping student behavior?
We have a lot of students that have experienced trauma, and that can be, maybe it can come out at any point in time in somebody's life, and it's difficult to say that. The world that we live in right now, there's lots of events and lots of things happening, and our students have a lot of exposure.
Right.
So I think having those trauma informed practices kind of as a tool in your tool belt is something that's going to be important, because there are more and more, we get more and more reports to the statewide union that students are struggling more and more, but we can also have support for them. So and we're getting that information, nationally as well, but it's something to go into the classrooms, and you just see students sometimes just really struggling,
Yeah.
but we can reach them.
Yes, yes. Which kind of leads into my next question. How do we as educators recognize these signs of trauma when a student doesn't show any signs of trauma, right? So, like my example, I went through a traumatic experience when I was in preschool, kindergarten, right? But it happened and I didn't talk to anyone about it. And it took me years to finally talk about it, right? And so I feel like throughout my elementary, middle, and high school experience, I may have not looked lonely, right? But I felt super lonely. Like I just didn't have anyone reach out to, right? So it wasn't until I started my undergrad program where it's like clicked and finally I chose, or I felt like I could open up about what happened to me as a kid, right? How can we as educators find the signs that are not talked about on the textbook, right? Because there's all about textbook science, like, oh, this student goes through this and this and this and that, right? But like, how do we as educators find that balance or that middle where it's like they don't show any signs, but like, how should we approach that? Or
Well, I think there's a couple of things. Like, so one, it's hard when there are no, it's very difficult
Right.
when kids or young adults are really good at masking the signs. So I think that the key is not to re-traumatize,
Right.
to make sure that we have safe environments, because hopefully at some point there'll be support. And then, like you had said, when you recognized it, then there is support and you could get some support. So I think the key first is that we realize we're not re-traumatizing kids, or if we start seeing signs, we do something about it instead of just wiping it off. Like, it's just this. It's just talking too much, or some of those things. Like, okay, is there something behind this? Is there a tension happening? Like, what is this that's going on with a kid? Instead of just wiping things off as, oh, that's just their personality. Do we really like what else is going on? But not assuming that it's that hard balance, because has everybody had trauma, or is everybody just needing to have some space here? It's a hard one, but I think having the conversation, having the professional development, teachers, educators, everybody that works with the students, that sees them. It may be a custodian that's recognizing, hey, they're doing fine in the classroom. The minute they get in that lunchroom, something changes. Maybe it's the custodian that recognizes something different and then communicates, or, there's something. So I think all the adults have to have some training so that maybe if I miss something, somebody else might, because they might have that different relationships. It's really hard. My thing has always been, am I doing anything that might re-traumatize? And you never know, but give yourself grace, but at the same time, try not to create conditions for trauma as best you can.
Do you recall a story from your classroom or work that reveals how compassion can change outcomes?
I have a couple. I will just go to, so I have one. So there was a girl I had. She was an African American girl. I had her in second grade. She was the tallest. She was larger than everyone else. And she was very aggressive. But her mom was like 6'2", larger woman, and very aggressive. And had kind of navigated through her life because she was taller, and felt like because she was picked on, she needed to be the aggressor instead of getting bullied. So her daughter was starting kind of down the path, because that's what mom was teaching her. Like, instead of, being teased and stuff, you just need to be the aggressor. And in second grade, the mom kind of came at me with some stuff and wasn't very nice on the phone call, because she assumed some things. She assumed I was going to be just like the teachers she had right before. She called me racist. She didn't think I was African American. I mean, all these things, until I said, you just need to get up here to the school and see me. You need to come up here right now. We need a conversation face to face. Because one, I wanted to talk to her face to face, but her daughter, I knew that speaking the way her mom spoke was hurting her. It was not her personality. And I knew that if we could kind of stop this in second grade, she could be her, not her miniature mom. And I understood, like, as I got to know her mom and her throughout that year, I got to know more. But, her mom came in mad and all this stuff, and then saw me, and then apologized immediately and broke down in tears and told me the whole story. Like, her whole life story right there. And like, I had to have somebody cover my class because the students were coming, but I mean, all the things, because she had never seen a Black teacher ever in her life. She said how she had been bullied. She didn't want her daughter bullied. And I explained, I'm not trying to harm your kid, all the things. And she, I said, your daughter's going to have a struggle if X, Y, and Z. It's like, this is just the ways of, unfortunately, here's some pitfalls in schools, but we can navigate this. And it's not your daughter, like, you're doing the best you can as a mom, like all those things. And her daughter and her, like, they had the best year ever. And then the next year, she wasn't in my class, but she had a good year because we would check in. And then they moved. They moved to Indiana. And I gave her my phone number. I said, you just call me. Call me if there's a problem. And she called me. And I said, nope, we're not going to go back into these tendencies of being the bull. all those things. And I kept in touch with them. And the daughter graduated from high school. She went on to college. She's the first person ever in that family to go to college. And it's just one of those things where like the mom was like, thank you, you helped, you kept helping and kind of helped discover her and her daughter. But her daughter, when I talked to her when she was in college, said she doesn't think she ever would have even graduated from high school. Like she was done in second grade, in the beginning of second grade. She would think every day about how to run out of the building. She didn't want to be there at first. She was like, because of the message, she just remembers her mom telling her stuff. She said, but you changed my mom. I'm like, so that's like one of those stories that I'm like, that one sticks with me. That one sticks with me.
And it's impressive how one small conversation can make such a big change for students and the family.
Yeah, taking the time sometimes. I mean, there's lots of them. I mean, I've been fortunate that I have quite a few of those, luckily.
No, that's good. No, that's good. That's what makes you a great teacher.
Well, thank you. I say you were my smile. It makes me sad. You were my smiles. But now I'm thinking, what's the smile height? All those the things I know now about kids and stuff as you learn every year.
And then can you speak to any professional development initiatives or legislative advocacy education Minnesota is backing in this area?
Yep. So when the legislature came out with the discipline policies around non-suspensions for our K through 3 students, we came up with some professional development to help support. What does that look like? As well as we've already had we have a good resource of educators around restorative practices and other, I'd say if you put that kind of in a bucket or, about around restorative practices, how to reach students, creating safe learning environments, then also then into then non-exclusionary discipline policies, having some just really direct professional development that way. Also then kind of moving into the trauma-informed practices, weaving some of that in. And so we do have professional development around that. The nice thing is we have such great professionals and educators that say, hey, anybody have resources or been to a training around XYZ and or with our staff and professionals, we can reach out to the nationals and they'll provide support. So we can give that support. It's a pretty good, but we have a good resource. We have some good resources for it. It's hard to like think and name things, but I'm like, we have a book, which is great. Stuff online.
Hey, that's good. That's good. And then how do you navigate tension between district mandates and what's best for individuals, students, and educators?
Yep. I think that's where local unions have a key role. So they can go to district administration and actually advocate for what's best for their teachers and educators and their students. So like in Richfield, we started a workload committee. That workload committee met every month with the union and administration. So it was around like curricular things, but it could be around discipline. We took up like clothing and attire because it was like, why are kids being disciplined for putting a hood on? Is that really stopping them from absorbing the information in the classroom? So we could take that up in this workload committee and then come up with policies and things to then go to the school board. And then when the school board it came from the union and district administration, we could come together jointly and go before the school board. Because that's the other piece and things that, a lot of the policies then have to be approved by the school board. Okay. But the union working in partnership with the district or the union advocating for what's right and going to the school board, that's where a lot of power and work can happen on behalf of our students and the educators. So
that's good. I think it's good to see that schools are changing little by little, right? Like as a student, these policies were in place. Now as a teacher, 5 years later, these policies, some of them from the original ones were removed or were updated to a better version, right? So it's good to see that a lot of schools are changing. Yeah.
And it is. It's and it takes a while sometimes. Even with adults, they're used to doing something a certain way. But when it comes down to it, really, is the hat or the sweatshirt going to impact what they're learning? And some people will say it's not respectful. And I'm like, I would rather have somebody wearing a hat and listening than somebody not wearing a hat and being disruptive than having to take the time to figure out what's going on. But of course, take the time to figure out what's going on. I'd much rather have hats and hoodie and all the other stuff than deal with, and take that time to then figure out what else is going on where, and that's yeah. So I'm glad we've moved. We're moving towards positive things.
Yeah, that's good. Yes. Yes. All right. So that's wrapping up segment 4. Now we're going to enter our final segment, navigating tension and advocacy. So, what would you say to fellow union leaders or policymakers who still view harsh discipline as necessary for safety?
Yeah, it's difficult because you want to make sure that your students are safe,
Right.
but harsh policies aren't needed for everything. Like I believe that there's a need to have rules. There's a need to say, okay, if you do this, here's a consequence. And to then show students that, okay, when a mistake happens, here's what we're going to do about it. But just to say, like, okay, you fall off your chair, now you're out of the classroom. Like, if the objective is learning, you should be able to learn. But now, if you cause a fight and cause injury, should there be a consequence? There should probably be a consequence for that. And the consequence should fit what has happened. So that's where, we need to really look at what's happening in the spaces. And then again, though, it still comes down to the why. I think we get so fixated on the action. There was a fight that happened, and these things happen. And we have educators. We have educators getting hurt, like seriously hurt. And that's an issue that we have. I just don't want the reaction to that to be that we implement these harsh policies that are going to impact everyone. I mean, we have some serious issues right now that we need to make sure that people are safe, they can learn, but we also want to do it in a way that we're not affecting a student's trajectory in life because of an incident. So it's a hard balance. I know that we're smart enough to figure it out as a state, as a local, as a district, et cetera. We can do that, but it's a hard balancing act. But again, it should not be the same thing for everything. You fall off a chair, you shouldn't be suspended. And is suspension the rule for everything? Should a suspension happen for something extremely dangerous? Well,
Right.
there's probably, reasons for taking a break sometimes.
Right. I remember, I think it was my sophomore year of high school. It was right after lunch, right? And I was hanging out with a friend of mine. And I remember this one guy from behind me. It was during it was lunch, like it was right by the end, right? So passing time was right. So we were all just like hanging out in the the main hallway. And this another student from behind me, grabbed me from the back and threw me into the ground, right? Got up. Administrator come and sees, right? They stop it right there and then. But somehow I also got punished, and I received in school. We both received in school suspension. And me and my family found that unfair. I was like, I didn't even do anything. Like, why am I getting punished for their actions, right? So I was like, where's the line drawn? Where it's like I'm the one getting punished, and so is he. To only he should be punished because it was his actions that impacted me.
That's where that zero tolerance.
Right.
Those policies don't necessarily work because are you investigating, figuring out what happened, or are you just saying we have a zero tolerance for this, so everybody involved gets punished the same?
Right.
I mean, you had nothing to do with it.
And I was like, why am I getting punished for their actions?
Yeah.
So
it's kind of different than a car crash.
Right.
If you're hit by somebody and you're injured in a car crash, you shouldn't be punished
Right.
for it. But it's difficult, but it takes time. It takes time then to be able to figure out what happened, and it should take time.
Right.
Because something serious happened. An assault or something like that's serious. That should take time.
Yes.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, well, grew out of it.
I know, but
what can I do now?
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
How do you balance your role as a union president with the need to speak out against policies that may harm marginalized students?
That's a hard one. I can always be myself and speak as an individual. But in this role, it's going to be a balancing act. But at the same time, I know that I have members behind me. I know where we stand because Education Minnesota has strong racial and social justice roots. And so when I speak, I feel pretty affirmed by what's going on and where our members are at to be able to feel pretty grounded with who I am. But I'm never going to be somebody that's going to be too quiet because that's not who I am. So if I have to speak as an individual outside of my role, I'll just have to do that because that's who I am. I mean, I have to be myself. That's why I was elected, and that's what the students and everybody else around the state, I think, needs. So, and we have to be able to be ourselves. But there is a role. There is a, it's a balancing act for sure. But I would be doing a disservice to myself if I didn't speak out for what's right, what I believe is right.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's good. Yeah. Stay true to
Yeah.
yourself. And then, what's your vision for discipline that supports both students and teachers?
Oh, great question. I think it would be discipline that is student centered and not adult centered. I know that's hard because some adults would say, well, you're the president for the teachers union, but we are here for the students, and keeping that at the center, I think, is important. But I think the problems that we have that I've seen are when policies are made for us, not with us. And that's us with the educators so that we can be there to help have our voices in the room. Here's what's happening. What can we do to address these issues? And then having somebody there then to keep that student voice at the center as well is the important part. It's a hard one. I would want to see, though, keeping trauma informed practices, restorative practices, all these good best practices that we know now at the center, because we know that's what works and that's what keeps kids from being harmed more by these systems that we have. So, I mean, we know we're in a system, but we want to create as less harm as we can. Hope I answered that one okay, but I'm just like, God, it's a hard one. It's kind of case. No, you have to have rules. You have to have some boundaries, but at the same time, every student's different. Every case is a little bit different, so it's hard to have those sweeping rules.
Yes.
So it's a hard one, but not the president answer. That's the Monica answer, which is very hard.
And then, what gives you hope right now in the push to dismantle the school to prison pipeline?
I think, well, the work you're doing and people knowing about it. It's been there's been research out there for a while, but I think the more people invested
Hmm.
in our students, truly invested in our students, trying to get them to be their best selves, not just be, kind of widgets in the system. Because, I don't believe that schools should be a business. I think,
Right.
we're in the business of educating kids, if people want to say a business. But I really think the more people know that what we do can impact the lives of our students, not just academically, but can change their whole trajectory. I think they would understand what we're trying to do by making some changes, what we're trying to do by spending more time getting to know them, not just pushing curriculum or curriculi down their throats. That's a whole nother conversation about America's curriculum. But I think they would then see that this thing called discipline, that it's not just one thing. It's so multifaceted. And we're doing it to make sure that we're helping kids become the citizens, the functioning adults, um, the the adults that we want in this world. I want to say just citizens, but the functioning adults that we have in this world.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
The global citizens. This world is so charged with words. It's a hard one to say, but that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, to wrap up this last segment, is there a message you'd like to leave with educators, students, or policy advocates tuning into this episode?
Thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you.
And thanks to all the educators and the students out there navigating the thing we call schools. It's hard from the student lens, it's hard from the educator lens. There's more and more being added to the day. And I think a lot of, like, in this realm with discipline, we're seeing some of that because of the demands put on our educators, put on our students. And sometimes we just need to slow down. And if we slow down and just get to know each other, get to know our students, spend time just kind of being, human creatures and talking and sharing and getting to know each other, instead of just thinking about the next, we won't have to spend as much time on this thing called discipline in the end. That's, I think, the thing I'll leave everybody with today.
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. So this conversation reminds us that policy isn't abstract, right? It's personal. Behind every suspension, every referral, every disciplinary form is a student whose story could go in a different direction. And behind every policy is a person with the power to reshape it. Thank you to Mrs. Byron, because I can't call you Monica. I can't call my former teacher by their first name. Even my coworkers can't. I stick to last name. So thank you for showing us what it means to lead with both conviction and compassion. As union president, she's not just advocating for educators, she's fighting for the students whose voices are often left out of the conversation. If you're listening and wondering where change begins, it starts here, with dialogue, with discomfort, and with the courage to imagine something better. Let's keep pushing, let's keep listening, and let's keep building schools where justice isn't a word, it's a practice. I'm Uriel. This is Classrooms and Jail Cells. Until next time, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's awesome.